Okay, 1, 2, 3. And video details. There we go. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up on YouTube if you're watching. And it says we're going live. Here we are. Okay. Hello, hello. Someone's watching already. Welcome, Anne. How are you doing? Make sure to unmute yourself. Can you say hi really quick?
Hi, really quick.
Wonderful. So Anne is one of our members of School of Living and has been very active for years, and we're happy to have her with us. I'm going to show a few things and try to keep with the agenda that I had for today. Okay, what's the agenda number 1? Our next publication. Yep, trying to do a newsletter, and I'm going to screen share really quick. Screen share up here. I don't know if I worked that. There we go. Full screen share. And we're going to go to the School of Living website right here. Share this tab instead. There we go. Does everybody see it? Okay, School of Living website. And this is the Zoom cast publication. If any of you guys are interested in finding our Facebook page, our homepage, or a series of podcasts about various subjects, very well done. Go ahead and go to schoolofliving.org/soul, comma, Zoomcasts with an S. And you will find all these amazing Zoomcasts from the recent past. And so what I was looking for was publications. I'll click here. And if you go to publication and you go to School of Living News, April 2020th, we will be bringing it back. So that's where it kind of drops off. And I believe there's one in January 2023. So just to show the people on YouTube, it's easy to access all of these newsletters by just going to our website and seeing, I'll click on one, for example, a little bit how they were set up. Here you go. We have a couple updates. I was talking about conference calls, land trust. There we go. An article by Rita Jane, our friend. They're in Virginia in Common Ground. These are some pictures, as you can see. It's wonderful. Oh, look at that. I don't think I've seen this. Goats at Julian Woods Community by Deborah Fisher.
I'm not seeing what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you're not seeing on the screen share? Okay, I'm going to take the screen share out. I was basically just showing people that that website that we have. But now I'm back to us. And so that was my first agenda item for today, was how people can access the blogs, and there's quite a few of them. So I guess you couldn't see the screen share, but it was working. So I just showed people how to get to the website. I guess my other agenda item is, the next one is, how was the recent School of Living meeting? And I don't have a video ready for it, but I thought it was really cool. You were there too, Anne, right? Okay. Would you care to comment, since you're here, on how you felt the last quarterly meeting for School of Living went?
I think there was a lot of struggle in some ways, not struggle interpersonally, but understanding the topics and moving forward. Yeah, we're in a place where moving forward is very slow and a little frustrating.
Oops, sorry, lost the duality here. There we go. Dual mode. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like the celebration after the board meeting was much more jovial.
Oh, yeah.
And to if we only have a few minutes on the subject, and I'm going to spare a couple seconds, there'll be a video later, but there was pumpkin carving, tie-dye, there was books from the School of Living, there was an auction, there was a great band. And when I told the band that I was from Julian Woods, guess who they said they knew? John Mangan and Robert Forsberg. And they were like, oh, I know the Julian Woods folks. They're awesome. So just so you know, you get around. I forget the name of the band, but they let me play the drum with them. So I love them. I really love them. And it just speaks a lot to the impact school of living has had. So I thought the gathering went really well, and the board meeting is trying to figure out, if I understand correctly, the next turnaround for the leadership and what needs to be done for us as an organization to keep functioning at an optimal rate or level, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, did you have any other thoughts? Well, how did you like the farm where it was held?
Well, I love that place. That's why I went down. It's 3 hours from me, and I only had a day to go down and back. But it's worth it just to be there at that farm and connect with um, everybody that was there.
One thing that I can note is that it's the perfect location between all the other land trusts. And that's one of the things we have in the School of Living is the land trusts are about 3 hours from each other, so that the quarterly meetings for years and years where they were always held in person, let's say until COVID. And that's when Zoom became a great option instead of nothing. So I really value the fact that you and I weren't the only people who drove that much to get there. And I saw a lot of familiar faces, and 90% of which I did not know. But like the 10% that I knew were from all over the place. And it was great because the self-guided tour I really enjoy. It's a beautiful farm, couple acres, and the goats, they let me in the goat pen. I played my flute. I don't know. I have a thing for playing flute for goats or something. But yeah, it was really quaint. And I guess they have 60 beehives this year. But she said they're not all on the same property, so thank God. Okay, so we both like the property, the meeting. You know, we're gonna need more meetings to figure out what's next. I have a next agenda item. It's called From Theory to Practice Building Utopia. But since I have a friend who's going to give me a tour of Twin Oaks this weekend, maybe you could tell me how the Walden 2 book had something to do with Julian Woods.
I I can't really speak to that.
Okay. So to tell the audience, Walden 2 is a book written by B.F. Skinner, and it was talking about in 1948 living in a community. And so on that premise of the book, they built this place called Twin Oaks, which is right near where I'm at, currently in DC right now. So that place called Twin Oaks, which is a great community, was built to be a replica of B.F. Skinner's scientific Utopia. Remember the subtitle, but it's an old book, and a lot of these communes or communal living arrangements were influenced by this writing. And so the story is a philosophy teacher has two students are like, "Hey, we're going to a commune. Come with us." And Fraser, the guy who started the commune, was an old student of the philosophy teacher. Okay, I forgot all the names. I'm not going to tell you about the book. Go read the book. But what I read was a Twin Oaks experiment from an author named Kat Kincaid. And she wrote a book that Robert Forsberg gave me called Is It Utopia Yet? In 1991. And so there are two books about Twin Oaks over 40 years, and they're still alive today. So basically, Building Utopia is a horrible title. I don't think anyone's doing such a thing. But I guess since I have you on the phone, maybe it's just supposed to be 5 minutes. We don't have to talk about Twin Oaks, but how does the decision of we're going to get some land and live together, how does that feel? I don't remember how many years, but how does that feel like 30, 40 years later? Um, when you've reaped the benefits of it and it's still maybe not perfect, but there has been a virtue that you've lived. I guess my question is it utopia yet? No, but that's the whole book. But is it, I don't want to ask if it's better than just an HOA, but like, so what are some benefits to the life and community that you have lived? Is my question.
You're asking me?
Yes, why not?
Oh, well, I wasn't sure who you're talking to. Ah, well, I've lived with my neighbors for 30 to 50 years, some of them, you know, shorter, some of them longer. And so there's a certain amount of trust. I don't lock my house. A lot of us don't.
For
Yeah,
those of y'all listening, people hunt out there. I wouldn't just go looking for trouble, but like people don't need, you're saying within a small neighborhood, you don't need to always feel like on guard, right? Keep going. I'm sorry.
yeah. That's the biggest thing is trust. I mean, we're a diverse group of people, so we don't always agree on everything. Um, and the first 10 or 15 years, maybe it was even um, difficult to maintain the trust and the connection, but we've gotten to that point now.
I really like how not everyone can do everything, but the workload gets split where you live, and it gets done. Someone does it. So some of these communities with people eager to get in a communal living thing where like they're not really related, we don't expect it to be um, easy, but we're not ready for how interpersonal stuff could stop the community from doing the basic stuff that needs to get done. So, having lived in Julian Woods myself, I guess it's a real privilege to have seen a, I won't call it a working recipe. And I guess we could call it a work in progress recipe. But from what I've experienced, you guys are pretty good at having a systems meeting separate from the community meeting to get what you need to get done accomplished. And what's great is people have had their livelihoods successfully somewhat, and so no one's really poor. You could live on a shoestring budget, but people have they don't have a reliance on the community to feed their bills or to give them free rent. Everybody pays their bills. They live near each other, and I think what you said is very important. You live for years together, and you trust each other. Thanks for sharing that. It's precious. I'm going to check my next agenda item. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about a benefit of life and community?
I think I've done my part.
Okay. Wait, I'm sorry. The dog barked. Did you say you've done your garden?
My part.
Oh, you've done your part. Okay, good. Sorry.
Didn't realize this was going to be an interview.
Well, if other people showed up, it'd be more of a round table. I've had one person show up to each educational committee, and 25 people watch every episode. So I think that's better than doing Zoom calls. No one wants to do Zoom calls anymore. It's kind of, we don't have time. So whenever someone has time, I'm grateful to have them. And this is your interview. My next question is on an author from the 70s. If you're unfamiliar with it, you don't have to answer, but have you heard of Daniel Quinn and a book called Ishmael?
Yeah, through Robert.
I inherited Robert's copy of Ishmael. And so I was with Robert Forsberg, one of our founding members of, well, one of the founding members of Julian Woods and one of the long-term members of School of Living. And so Robert, he told me that monkey on the wall, it was a gorilla. And he said, that monkey, he taught us everything. That's Ishmael. And he was not joking. He was very serious. And I had no idea what he was talking about. So I found the book on the shelf, and I've read 8 books from that author. And it's a really cool take on ecology. I guess to try to sum this book up as concisely as I can, and it's a monkey who is named Goliath in the zoo. And a wealthy Jewish man buys him and he renames him Ishmael. He says, you're not Goliath, you're Ishmael. And he teaches him how to read, and he reads so much he becomes smarter than the Jewish man who dies. And the Jewish man's daughter doesn't really like the gorilla. And so he puts an ad on Craigslist. And so the main character walks into this building and finds a gorilla that talks. We don't know if it's psychic. We don't know. We don't care. And so he tells a story. This is a fiction book, everyone. He tells a story about life and captivity and how we need to live as the community of life on earth and be aware of this whole like dominion over everything else and all the things. And so anyways, he describes a lot of things in this book. I won't go into it, but it's about life and captivity. And it really makes us want to understand ecology a little better. So I don't want to go off on 10-minute tangent from a book that's kind of like people should read it for themselves. But I'm really grateful for Robert giving me a few of these key books. Do you have any other books like that people should read? Walden, perhaps? Does anything else come to mind when you think of like ecological literature from the 70s?
I'd rather you stop asking me questions. I'm here to listen to you.
Oh, what an honor. Okay. No worries. I will keep going. Okay. I have another question, or no, not a question, but it was an agenda item. 5 minutes on Scott and Helen Nearing, a brief intro to the good life. Peace, activism, and homesteading taught a generation how to be more self sufficient. Okay, so a little background. I was walking with my neighbor Barbara, and she had a dog, Mumio, who is no longer here, but this Labrador. And she said, homesteading. Have you ever heard of Scott and Helen Nearing? And I was like, who's that? It was about 4 years ago. And now I've read about 8 of their books. So Scott and Helen Nearing have written a series of books called How to Live the Good Life. And basically, hey, come here, Annie. Sorry, the dog's kind of funny. Basically, they teach people how to not drop out of the system, but how to be homesteaders. And they also have a maple sugar book and a long, fascinating story of each of their lives. Fascinating tidbit: Scott Nearing died at 100 years old, and he was giving speeches until his 100th year. My grandpa's 97, and I always think of Scott Nearing. So he was a peaceful activist in World War One, and he got booted out of, I think it's Toledo University. I'm not sure. He taught in Chicago somewhere or Ohio, and basically because of his activism for peace, all his books were taken out of print, taken out of the curriculum, and he had to live another life. So they had 2 homesteads, and they built their stones with cobstones from their walks every day. And my neighbor told me to read this book. Barbara told me to read Loving and Leaving the Good Life. Now, if you guys want to start with the saddest book of the whole series, after Scott died, Helen wrote a book at 80 years old about her husband and her. And she had to move out of this, I think it's 7 acres homestead, or I forget them. I'm going to get them all mixed up. I'm sorry. Their homestead became, available. And long story short, this book details their escapade from the beginning to sort of the end. And they also say, in the end, they say if we would have lived in community, they have a whole constitution that they would have written out to try to get along. But they just had guests who came over, and that was good enough for them. So I don't want to bore everybody with my soliloquy on a subject so dear to me as the good life. I invite you all to go look at Loving and Leaving the Good Life. Other books: The Making of a Radical, The Making of a Homesteader, and Scott Nearing wrote like 60 books. So that's another rabbit hole for later. The Conscience of a Radical I found at Robert's house, and it's a really good book. It's his autobiography. And the Maple Sugar book we bought, but it's, unless you're making maple sugar, it's kind of boring. So one of the things they realized is they had to make a value for the marketplace when they lived in Vermont, I believe. And so they made maple sugar, and they made hard candies for the gas station. And that's when Helen Nearing wrote this book, the Maple Sugar book. So I could only show you books I have or talk about them. I feel like that's sufficient for that subject. Oh no, the next one: Flight from the City and Other Works by Ralph Borsodi. On the website, you could go to publications and find a lot of Ralph Borsodi's work for those of y'all out there interested. I only have read 3 books: This Ugly Civilization, Flight from the City, and let's just say I've read a lot of these little flyers, like the Decentralist Manifesto and the 17 Problems of Man and Society. If Ralph Borsodi interests you, I would recommend Googling Bill Sharp, Bill, Bill, Sharp, like my jokes if they ever were sharp, or like a knife, like Sharp, Bill Sharp. He reprinted almost all of the Ralph Borsodi material that at that point were still in our library at the School of Living. So our publications department, Bob, said that he's really proud of me for kind of like Bill Sharp, like going in there guns blazing, going, I'm Julian, I'm going to learn everything. And it's so not how it works. So thank you, Anne, for having been such good support in my quest to understand what it is I joined. Um, yeah, so those three books, in a nutshell. Flight from the City is not his first book. He wrote a book on, okay, Ralph Borsodi was an economist 100 years after Henry George, whose parents were into Henry George. So we'll call them Georgists. They're not living in Georgia. For those of y'all who hear me say Georgists, his parents were Georgists. Henry George created Progress and Poverty, where he talks about the single land tax. That's a tax that the French king Louis XVI refused his physiocrats right before the revolution, where they would just stop taxing bread and salt and just tax one thing, one number, to make it easier for everybody. So that never happened. And so in 1879, after the French Revolution, Henry George, who's an economist, writes a book called Progress and Poverty. Now that changes Ralph Borsodi's parents' life. So Ralph Borsodi was raised with this whole thing. I'm born, therefore I deserve land where I could, grow food and stuff and live. And it's almost like an inalienable right. It's almost like Rousseau and saying feudalism can't take all the freedoms away from the human being. We need something better. Nature with a capital N, So I'm learning about that in school. It's a little bit of a digression. I'm sorry. So you have the first book was about, he was a Macy's executive in like 1920, and he made a lot of money. So Ralph Borsodi, he was wealthy by the end of working for Macy's as a marketing intern in the 1920s. Edward Bernays wasn't even around, right? So propaganda, public relations wasn't what it is today. So he made a lot of money and he thought it was useless. So his first two books are critiques of the marketing, meaning like we're selling people useless stuff. And so his third book, which is a really long book, This Ugly Civilization, comments on, it's 800 pages and talks about there's industries of waste. We're not using much of this, waste. And there's industries of use, examples of which are like a hand mill, a sewing machine, things that make your homestead work better. That's useful. Things that are like George Carlin calls it plastic dog poop. We don't need to bring this to Mars. Maybe we could go to Mars and bring them permaculture and not useless stuff. So that's all I got from that book. It was a very long book. It's a good book. It's written in a language that might not be fun to read today. And then I started reading the Decentralist Manifesto, which claims that a federation of little farming communities would be better than a centralized system that is in charge of everything. And that's a very small handout. The 17 Problems to Man in Society was Ralph Borsodi's great work. And it's been really fun. We have some French people in the chat. Sorry, Anne. Merci, Plume. Bonjour à toi. Hello. Hope you speak English. And she says hi to you, Anne. Merci, Plume. Plume means feather in French. That's her stage name for YouTube. Okay, so Ralph Borsodi wrote Flight from the City in about 1936, I want to say. So right before World War II, he moves out to the city. I think it was 7 acres. Don't let me mess it all up. But he moves to 2 homesteads, one after the other. And when Ralph Borsodi makes it to the second homestead, they look for a Montessori alternative. Finding nothing in the USA in 1936, they founded the School of Living. And that chapter 4 of Flight from the City, as he leaves the city. Sorry, I can mute it for a second. Sorry. It's a big backyard. They're doing their job. They're guarding the place. So in the book Flight from the City, we realize that in 2 hours at home, Mrs. Borsodi, I forget her name. I'll call her Mrs. Borsodi is what he calls her. She taught the kids in 2 hours what it took 8 hours in school. And the people who were supposed to figure that out, like, are they being taught enough? They were told, like Ralph and his wife, that the kids were like perfect. And so they realized there's a lot of compulsory schooling since the 1850s that's just kind of like keeping kids somewhere while parents are working their jobs, right? So the School of Living in the beginning, now that it's been almost 90 years since we were chartered in Brookville, Ohio, It's branched out. It's done a lot of things, but initially it was Ralph Borsodi teaching his two kids briefly in 2 hours exactly what they needed to know for the day, so they could be liberated to do homestead stuff or what it is they really wanted to do. That's how I understand Flight from the City. It's an audiobook, guys. If you go on YouTube, you could find a guy who's wearing a Christmas hat and he has a beautiful voice, a little bit of piano in the background, and he reads all of Flight from the City in a row. So that's a great way if you don't read, if you have dyslexia or something like that. Like if you're dyslexic, like you can't focus, just have someone read it to you while you're doing chores. And it tells you of the little things like he started milling his own bread. He started sewing a jacket. He did it in 8 hours. Then he says, well, I could do it in 4 next time. And so I really like his message, but it's kind of hard to see the proof in the pudding. Is leaving the city necessarily better? If you ask me, before World War II, it was probably a great idea to leave the city, but he wasn't poor and he wasn't looking for affordable housing. Let's get that clear. He was a guy who worked for Macy's as an advertising guy and made a lot of money and didn't think that wasting it was a good idea. So that's in a nutshell what I think of his 2, 3 books that I've read. The 17 Problems of Man in Society is where he attempts to try to fix everything. It's a big old book. It's not in print anymore. And Herb Goldstein told me it's $350. So it's a book where, if I've read the little handout correctly, he breaks down 4 categories of problems we can solve. And he tries to write out his, 400-page solutions to everything. So if I ever read it entirely, I will tell y'all about it. I think that's enough for that agenda item. My next one is kind of hitting home. I wrote, finding the turnaround. Are there young, aka 20 to 50-year-old people who care out there? Are there young people who care out there? Why is everyone wishing but not practicing a sustainable life? Questions for every single community ever created. I wasn't necessarily asking you that question, and I don't think I am. You asked not to. How do I answer that, dude? I'm here. I don't think that helps enough, but I feel like I definitely am not alone in interest. This is why my question was kind of loaded. Why is everyone wishful thinking but not moving to the country and doing it? And on YouTube, there are quite a few homesteaders who do it very well, and most of them probably have a day job. So I've had a few day jobs, and I think it's money and time. If I can't sleep at your house, if you don't give me meals, I have to find time to earn money, to have leisure time, and that doesn't exist anymore. But I had the privilege of being grafted in a homestead at Julian Woods, where I freely gave my time because I learned skills. So the trade-off for a turnaround is as easy as making the skills that you get from being here for almost free, cheap. Dirt. We'll call it so cheap. We'll call it affordable housing. But it's not like you just get a $500 a month apartment. It comes with responsibilities. And that, for 5 years, I was immersed in it. So how do I tell young people to do that? I feel like it's manipulation, so I can't. I have to inspire. And I feel to answer that question, I have to say the key to following through with a turnaround, if your community is like Julian Wood's community, going to be 50 years old next year, woohoo, going to do potluck. You got to establish what it is that inspired you to come out and figure out if there's a new version of that or a rekindling of the flame. And there's 5 land trust communities in the School of Living. We all have to do the homework and find what brought us here and what's going to make the next turnaround, the quote unquote young people who have need for money and jobs and busy work sometimes and degrees and fit in the real world. I don't know. My dad tells me all these things. I'm fine with the 5 years I just spent. And I go to Penn State. I'm in a school. It's very formal. And I honestly like having a foot in both worlds. And most communities that are going to work, they're going to either create a value from the marketplace or that could be sold at the marketplace, or go into town and earn the money to buy a homestead and pay for the bills. Um, Plume, our French audience says, "Thank you. Remember, I'm French. I listen and try to understand." So, luckily, you could watch the subtitles on the replay on YouTube, and the auto-generated subtitles are really good, and you could switch the language to French. So, Plume, écoute en français avec les sous-titres si tu veux. It's as easy as that. Anyways, we have probably not answered that question, but I don't think it's to be answered by me. I'm very young. Finding the turnaround is as easy as it's not easy. If it were easy, we wouldn't be here. So I feel like if it was that hard, I wouldn't be here either, though. I mean, for me, I luckily was part of a recipe where I was needed. And it's a good moment to think, all you guys at Julian Woods accepted me. I had a potluck. That was my initiation. I I fit right in some ways. I have my problems. We all have, depression and whatever happens in our life. But I feel like in 5 years, like we've communicated a lot and got to know each other. And I think what you said in August of 2021, when I asked, like, how does it feel to like have been a community for so long? And you're like, we don't always agree on everything, but we get along. It almost reminds me that, like, though respect is needed, liking each other, like, sure, of course, respect, courtesy, but like, you don't have to come and get to know me too much. Like, once or twice a year, I feel like we've all done our duty of being outside of our zone of comfort and reaching out and whatever, like getting to know each other. It doesn't mean live in my living room and like, you know, when my morning after the party's over, like you still hear like just owning the place. It means if I have a Christmas party and that's all I do all year, please show up. Otherwise, you might never see me ever and live right next door. So I kept a pretty good balance of getting to know the neighbors and also giving them privacy in their own space. That'll have to be said for the turnaround in these places. Not everyone wants to be right next to each other all the time. And as we age and we have kids, like it's important to have like my private property versus like I'm an individual, but I don't mind like helping the neighbor when they need it. That that seems more reasonable from what I've experienced after establishing the community. Maybe you don't need to always be at each other's house doing carpentry and electrical work. Maybe you have a few outside people that come and people could just like retire and have the grandkids come and visit. That's how I kind of experience the ownership of land 50 years later. It's like you're kind of entitled to having your kids visit. Otherwise, what have you built? Like a hippie party for whoever's young to show up and never work. I worked. I showed up and I partied. So I apologize to all y'all for not working more. But I feel like as much as I worked, I wasn't enough. So what you really need is groups of young hippies with integrity. I don't know how to find them. And that's not you, Anne. It's the whole School of Living needs to find a turnaround within communities that have authenticity and ways of networking, be it school or anything. I think God has mysterious ways, and I'm not the most religious. So if a turnaround's meant to happen, let it be true, and that's it. I have another agenda, kind of linked. What's wrong with communal living? Oh no. Well, I don't have to say anything bad about that. But what the subtitle was gossip, interpersonal drama, life with unrelated people, and communitarian life basics. Oh my God. Oh, I'm in trouble, Anne. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with communal life at all. It's really easy. I'm not lying. But if I had some tips and tricks, it was optimist. Okay. Okay. Communication, right? And then knowing yourself, knowing when to go for a walk, knowing when to sleep on it, and knowing when to take a break. Like, once again, know yourself, know your energy. Um, la soif d'apprendre. Like, you have to have thirst for learning. Sorry, I will stop using French words, but you have to be like thirsty. You have to have like, you have to like learning, or it's just not going to work. And you'll feel like it's a chore if you don't like learning. So problems with communal living. Of course there's going to be gossip. Just be true to yourself. Just be honest and don't create excuses for people to gossip. It's gonna happen, but try to just be good. I don't have a cure to gossip. If I did, oh my god, I wouldn't be giving it away for free. My cure for gossip is just go for a walk if you're angry. Sleep on it if you're pissed, if you're still angry, and go to the person with whom you have a concern and be honest. And as William Penn said, get along or move on, because there's plenty of communities, plenty of places to go. There's usually a lot of room in these communities for you to give each other space. That's usually all it takes. So, um, gossip. I won't comment further on gossip. There should not be gossip. If you have like a serious concern, call the cops. If you don't want to call the cops, talk to your whole community internal grievance process. But if you just like talk about someone behind their back, like over time, like it really could destroy the trust. Yeah, and so that's what Anne said earlier is pretty much one of the best things we have is we have trust. Oh my god. So Plume, my friend Plume, is wondering why you're not talking, Anne. You see why YouTube is cool? Um, okay, so tips and tricks for communal living. I pass you the mic if you may.
Well, something that comes up in my mind periodically and I think, has been important for our group, and it just came up again today for me, is talking about things that are happening here that might become a problem in the future. So if you talk about them now and come to agreements, it seems to alleviate that future problem. So I can give you an example, although this has to do with the goats.
The goats. Oh my god. Well, you know what? I'm neutral, so go ahead. I'm Switzerland now. You
What?
go ahead.
What did you say?
Oh, I'm Switzerland now. They're not my goats anymore. So you could
Oh,
say anything you want about them. I said I'm Switzerland. I'm neutral. That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
oh,
Bad
I see.
joke. Go ahead. Tell us.
All right, well, I see there's a lot of more building going on in the goat area. And I was wondering, it's not just them, there's other places also around the property where people are building things or changing the land that's outside of the little private lot and it's on the common land that we have here. And I think we should have an agreement about that. Robert used to say, oh, if it's right on your property line, we seem to be able to agree that that's just fine. But it's never been, well, it hasn't been talked about in probably 20 years. So I think it's time. So I just contacted one of the people there, two of the people there, to see if I could talk with them at least, and then see if we need to bring it to the group. That's
I'm
my
I'm glad
story.
that I'm glad that the construction I saw yesterday because I was at the neighbors down I was at Robert's house in the garden, and I did see a lot of construction. I heard a big chainsaw, and I'm like, they must be glad I'm gone because they probably are doing that giant tiny house they wanted to build. But that if I'm just assuming, don't I mean honestly I know nothing. But what I'm saying is, yeah, a year ago though was the idea was like that whole bamboo forest was going to be a giant tiny house. So if that's what's happening, it's going to be a work in progress for a while, but it does affect the whole community because you drive past it. We're going
And
to say something?
again, that's not the only place. Other people here have expanded beyond their, you know, boundaries onto what we call our common land. And I just think it's something that needs to be talked about. So I'm hoping to start with these two little individuals.
Well, that is what I said. The first thing was communication, and I feel like it comes back to that. There's no resentment as long as you communicate before it becomes a problem. I live in a place in State College where my roommates are 80 and 60, and they're very smart and they're very quirky, and there's spreadsheets of everything I have to do. In case you missed a week, it's right there. You have to do the floor, you have to do the dining room this week. We're switching out. You have to do the bottom floor. And so I have quirky roommates who are very strict, and it's given me a lot of structure in the last 3 years. When I lived in Julian Woods, there were so many ideas. If any of them get accomplished, it's because people came over to help most of the time. But the impact on the community does require communication before it becomes a problem. So thank you for reminding us of that important thing. People overlook and then they get mad later. But if you see something boiling up and you feel like all you have to do is call and set up a rendezvous and go talk to them, all of y'all watching out there, please don't let it boil up. Just communicate. um Life with unrelated people and communitarian life basics. Well, we just gave you communicate. That's life with unrelated people. I wasn't related to anyone I just lived with. So be respectful, learn when to be quiet in the morning, let people have their routines, chop the wood, carry the water before the snow falls. Sorry, I'm in Pennsylvania. If the snow falls and you're the one chopping wood, carrying water, good luck. But find time to get to know each other. Conviviality, like have meals together and try to listen more than talk and be of service. Beyond that, like I'm a huge advocate of make art or music and take your time to do that as well. So that's my living with unrelated people in a nutshell. Just have fun, find ways where you're not always with everyone else, and make yourself be with everyone else as well. Try to find the balance. My last one was communitarian life basics. I guess it's when you live with other people, you have to understand that they're relying on you to do certain things. And it's not that you have a choice or not, it's just these things that need to get done. So that's my communitarian life basics in a nutshell. When people don't change the greenhouse cover, it could get ripped off in the middle of winter, and then it's a big problem. If you don't remedy the goats getting out, they might eat your garden. If you don't watch your goats when they're out, they might get ran over. So a key word is plan ahead. And yeah, communitarian life basics for me is just know that you'll have to be of service, and just be happy that you'll learn some skills you might not get in the city. And if you grew up on a farm, honestly, it's really easy. I did not. Just so everybody knows, I grew up in Julian Woods for the last 5 years doing tons of stuff. As a kid, my grandpa had a farm, so I went, but I never thought I would have goats. And yeah, communitarian life basics. I would recommend everybody here go look at the Federation for Intentional Communities. They have a lot better community community life basics to get you started. I only have one more agenda item: how, quote unquote, to become more sustainable. Subtitle: Examples from my experience with the School of Living and Neoterra, where I live, of what works in practice: livelihood, ecology, permaculture, consumer supported agriculture, flower farming, a Zendo temple, forestry, furniture repair, teaching, being an artist, car mechanic, electrician, plumber, healer, and pacifist. That's a very long subtitle. Uh, so the initial title was How to Become More Sustainable. That's not really a good question. And if I wasn't asking you, Anne, if we were both asking that question unto the School of Living, how would you answer that? Like, how to be more sustainable? Isn't it like different for everyone? I would say scale down. Step one is don't think you need all the things you have and wonder, does this add value to my life? And go to the Goodwill and give them like a carload or two, and then move to the country with just what you need. Sustainable, find a community that's already doing it and plug into that. Unless you have a lot of money, no one's going to be sustainable from being a city life to like homestead life. I like the grid. I don't mind having a contingency plan, but I wasn't off grid for the last 5 years. And so, you came to listen to me, Anne. Poor you. I don't have a very clear thought about how to become more sustainable. So learn to listen, learn to love each other. Do you have any tips or tricks, Anne? It's our last agenda item, and then I'll let you go.
Nothing comes to mind.
So, if you have firewood and you have a generator, maybe you have a good backup plan. But I'd say when you try to become more sustainable, stay within your means, um, think globally, but act locally. And start by composting, start by growing food. So I think that's it. I want to let you have the last word of the evening. Oh, there we go. Plume said it's her night for her. Oh, she wrote in English. I listened during I'm going to sleep. Bonne discussion and see you soon. Well, thank you, Plume. À la prochaine. So we're actually in France right now. People are watching us all over. And I hope everyone enjoys the show. It was great to have you here, Anne. Thank you again for the earlier Zoom as well. It's precious. Thank you so much. À la prochaine fois. Do you have any last words for our audience here? Any message of hope, of continuation? And sorry, Anne. I was asking you. I was asking. Do you have any message? Maybe you're thinking. Sorry.
Oh,
Any last words for the audience, who probably is the School of Living itself that watches it later? If you have any words before we end the show, I'd like to let you have the last word.
no, I don't. I came to listen.
Well, bless your heart. Thank you so much. I will see you next time, and thanks for being with us. Good night, everybody. Namaste. Boom. Okay, the stream is